Hello,
Hello.
Jason. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Jason, first of all, you've produced five Purge movies and a TV show. What did you learn about the Purge that might help you survive a forever purge?
Well, I learned that the world with the purge is not a good place to live in. The purge, usually you don't wind up coming out alive. So, the one thing to do during the purge is to not leave your house. Many people decide that to do that in the movies, and I think they're right. I think that's the group that I would align with.
Absolutely. Okay, great. No, but what's so great about the franchise is that it's very rare to see multiple sequels doing even better than the original at the box office. So I was wondering, for you as a producer, how do you make sure you keep a franchise still fresh and interesting 5 movies in?
Well, that's the biggest challenge, right? To managing a franchise is how to, and there are very few franchises that, like you said, that every movie is done better than the prior film. Um, when you're managing a franchise, you're always balancing two things. You're balancing the audience's desire for the movie that they're going to see to feel like the other movies in the past, but also feel different than the movies in the past. And it's a very tough line to balance. James DeMonaco, who writes and directs these movies, really gets that. And the Forever Purge is a great example of that. I mean, it's an obviously a purge movie, but the idea that the purge is there are no rules, the rules are out the window. You can't contain anarchy, you can't contain chaos. That eventually it breaks through of a 12-hour limit and it just takes over the society. I thought was a great new idea to add to our purge movies, but to your point, it's a tricky thing to do to manage both those things.
Yeah, and speaking of tricky stuff, what is more tricky, because you produced sequels to movies that you produced from the beginning, and you also produced sequels from franchises you took over, like you did for Halloween. What's more tricky, producing sequels for movies that you produced right away, or for franchises you took over?
Halloween is harder. It's much harder to produce. If you produce the original movie, you kind of understand the DNA of the movie, of how it was done. You come to it with all this institutional knowledge. Producing Halloween that was the hardest movie I think I ever had to produce, because you're entering into a world you weren't a part of. In that case, for 12 movies, there had been 12 Halloween, or 11 or 12 movies. We weren't had nothing to do with any of them. So that's a much harder thing to do.
You've become so incredibly successful in the past 10, 12 years. And I was wondering, because of course you don't become successful just like that. It's hard work, of course. And I was wondering if there was a number one rule that you always wanted to stick to, before you were uh, uh, a great big producer. If there's something from the beginning on that you wanted to keep just the way it is.
Something that I yeah the thing that I always have to remind myself to keep is there are many more voices in my ear now. We have, the company's much bigger, and I think what's important to keep is to just not lose touch with your own gut. Even if everyone in the room says, don't do this, I have to go with what I feel. When the company was 3 people, that's all I went with. I only went with what I felt. But now that there's a bigger company, and there are different forces at work, I think it's important to remember, and I try and remember it, every day, to quiet everything else and just think about what I'm doing, and try and get as much information as I can, but then go with the gut decision and not be influenced by other people.
Awesome. Jason, I'm going to thank you very much for your time today. All the best for the Forever Purge, and see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks very much.